Kyle, that was fun. Chris Young, who is the general manager, the president of baseball operations at Texas Rangers. And that was just a great conversation. The two things that jump out at me, and we talked about baseball, we talked about his career, was one, leadership lessons, and two, the emotion that he showed, kind of just telling us about himself as a person.
Well, he tells the story about his dad and his dad passing away and him having to pitch the next night.
12 hours.
And amazing. And really just, he's so honest in this episode. And I think it's just a great listen for anybody who wants to hear about a Dallas kid that grew up here, played at Highland Park, went to Princeton, and then has really taken the baseball world by storm.
And with great lessons on leadership, though. Identity, what you focus on, what's important in life, and the issues of failure.
Yeah. We get into sports, we get into this current Rangers baseball season, and we also look back at the wonderful season of 2023.
Fun one.
Welcome to Intersections, where we take a multi-generational look at the critical issues facing America. Tom, we've got a fun guest today.
We sure do. Chris Young, president of operations for the Texas Rangers, and a great career. And we want to talk all about that in terms of high school here locally, going off to Princeton, 2 sports, and then all-star in baseball, and now all of the management side. We want to get into that. But we were just talking about where the Rangers are today, with some frustrations, at least in 2025, contrasting that versus 2023. So kind of as you walk in here right now, how do you look at the season and kind of how do you think about the season for the remainder, especially with aspirations going into the season that were World Series?
Well, one of the challenges of the baseball season, it is so long, and a 162-game season, and that is really after a 2-month spring training. So you're talking about, if you include playoffs, almost an 8-month season, and there's a lot of highs and lows, a lot of ups and downs, and as we were discussing before we started recording, the margins between winning and losing in baseball are very small. The best teams average maybe 5 or 4.5 runs per game, and the worst teams average 4 runs a game. So you're talking about very small margins in terms of winning and losing. And over the course of the season, you can have different hot streaks or cold streaks that will define your season. Most teams play 500 baseball, for long periods of time, and then either have a hot streak here and there or a cold streak that will define their season. So as we sit here today, almost June 1st, 2 months into the season, a team that came into the season with high expectations, a team that's built to win, and the hope is that we're going to compete for another World Series championship. We're a few games under 500 right now. We have not played our best baseball. They're 4 months ahead of us. There's almost 100 games in the season left. That's a long time. And so there's a lot that can happen. There's a lot that needs to happen, but we also can't sit back and wait for it to happen. We've got to start to affect change and see some improvement in the way the team's playing. But I do have a very high level of optimism that we have a great group of guys. We have a Hall of Fame manager. This team is very talented, and more often than not, when you have great guys who care about winning, that are extremely talented, and you have the right leadership in place, that good things will happen and it will come together. And that's my belief right now. But I also recognize there are no promises, there are no guarantees, and that's the beauty of sports.
And fair to say that, on paper at least, this roster is as good, if not better, than 2023. So assume that for a second anyway. In your position, president of the baseball operations, what levers are there for you to push over the next 4 months, realizing that back in 2023, you came to the end, great expectations, then all of a sudden division goes away with 2 games in Seattle, and from being at the top, you're down at the bottom, but you still come back and win the World Series.
That's right. It's a great question because it's been something we've had a lot of internal discussions about right now with our front office executive team of what levers can we pull? What can we do to get the best out of this group? And really, I sort of think about the beginning of our 2025 season to some degree as a continuation of 2024. And now we're getting into a period where we're, almost a year and a half of playing kind of average to below average baseball. And so what changes do we need to make? Are there personnel changes? Are there coaching changes? Is it philosophical change in terms of our style of play? Are there different resources the players need in terms of, is it more psychological than it is physical? How are we supporting our guys? How are we supporting? Are we demanding excellence in every manner? Are we hitting our core values in the way that we need to? We're leaving no stone unturned in terms of these levers, but the reality is there are only so many levers to pull. And sometimes just by pulling levers, you're not necessarily making improvements. Sometimes just stability and continuity and consistency and belief and conviction can be equally as important as change. And so there's a balance here. And I would be lying to you if I said I have all the answers, that I know exactly which buttons to push to get this team going and get the best out of them. Aside from having some level of consistency and being steadfast in leadership and projecting belief and optimism, because at my core, that's what I believe you have to do to win. You have to, in your soul, believe that you can and will win, and that you'll find a way. And that's my hope, is that this team will feed off that, and we will find a way.
So how do you build accountability and ownership, for that matter, when you're dealing with individuals that make $10 million a year,
sure,
and know that there are lots of other franchises where that would be happy to have them?
Yeah.
So how do you deal with kind of that accountability and motivating 25 individuals when they make a lot of money, and they're going to make a lot of money regardless?
Yeah, it's a great question, and I think it's something that the average fan often sees, and maybe even to some degree, it's a fair criticism of professional athletes, because they make a ton of money and they're going to underperform at times. And I think there can be a perception that when that happens, they don't care. For me, the accountability starts on the front end, on the selection process, that we are selecting players that have character.
The culture in the club.
Yes, exactly. Well, the culture, but also the individual character of the individual, of the player, knowing that this person is going to do everything possible to realize their full potential. And we always say, as an organization, one of our philosophies is, in terms of the front office, our job is to provide every resource possible to our players and staff. And in turn, what we ask of them is to utilize those resources. And my goal for our organization is that we are helping every person, whether it's a front office member, a player, a coach, whomever, that we are helping them realize their full potential. But part of that is choosing the people who want to realize their full potential, and knowing their makeup and their character, and knowing that, they're going to work and they're going to continue to push through and persevere. It's attributes like resilience and perseverance that are critically important. And
have you ever passed on a ball player that had superior skills, but you said, character isn't there, fit with our culture, fit in the locker room, that doesn't work?
100%. And it's one of our core beliefs that, and for me, it's based on my experience at every level, starting in youth sports through high school, college, minor leagues, major league, and being part of championship teams. It is not the most talented team that wins. It's the right group of people that come together with one common goal, and they play for each other. And so absolutely, we don't chase talent, we chase the right people. And that's a core belief of our organization.
Great start. Go ahead.
Okay, so we've started in on leadership. We've talked about this year's team. Take me back 2023. We lose the last two games, as Tom mentioned, in Seattle. We got to fly to Tropicana, play in Tampa Bay. And walk me through some of those series, because as I remember it, we were down 3-2 in the ALCS to Houston, having to go back to Houston after a very dramatic Game 5, suspensions, all sorts of craziness. Walk me through, from a leadership perspective, how you thought about the various challenges that you faced at the end of the year and throughout the playoffs.
Well, first of all, I love kind of reflecting on this. I don't do a good job of looking back. I always kind of look forward, and as to, motivated by what's next and what we need to accomplish. And so sometimes stepping back and reflecting on some of those moments, and you just named a couple of them that I'd kind of forgotten about, the suspensions and the kind of bad blood we had with Houston in that series.
He reminds me of a lot of bad stuff all the time. So.
But I actually, especially in this moment right now with our 2025 team and where we are, I think back to those times, and what I remember was the fight and the grit and the never quit attitude and mentality of the team. And that attitude allowed us to prevail. It allowed us to persevere and kind of overcome. And I remember when in that 2023 ALCS, when we lost Game 5, we were winning the game late, and we had the brawl, the benches clearing, and then Altuve hit a home run to put them up, and they went on to win the game, and it felt like we were done. It felt we have to go back to Houston and win 2 games. It felt like we were done. I was in the suite with my family and our executive team, and my kids are just bawling, and everybody is just completely dejected. And I had this sense of just kind of confidence. It was probably a little bit anger to kind of come over me. And I said, it's not supposed to be easy. And we've won 2 games in Houston before, and we're going to win 2 games again. And I really haven't shared this externally, but I will with you guys, because I look back on it, and part of me can't believe I did it at the time, but I sent a message to our entire organization that night. And the gist of the message was basically what I just said. It said that baseball and life, it's not fair. And oftentimes, the moments that feel the most unfair are rewarded with great things that happen immediately afterwards. And I said, that's what's going to happen to our organization. We are going to go down and we are going to win 2 games in Houston because we are filled with people that have character and resilience and perseverance and fight and all the attributes that winning people have. And we are going to overcome this for that reason. Now, the players didn't see that, but the rest of the organization, the coaches, the front office, everybody else did. And I thought it was very important in that moment to keep our spirits up. And we had an off day. We went down to Houston. We won the next 2 games, and then we went on and won the World Series.
It's happened! The Texas Rangers win the World Series!
It had nothing to do with my message. It had everything to do with the characteristics that the people in our organization have, and including our players. And for whatever reason, we were able to overcome that, and it brought out the best in us the next 2 days. And it was a special memory that I'll certainly never forget. And the experience of winning the first World Series championship for the Texas Rangers and in this community, which I have obviously am tied to, was just more special than I could have ever imagined.
Yeah, you downplay it, but leaders' messages to the organization make a difference.
You know, Tom, I don't give myself credit for that. I felt like it was necessary, and somebody has to say it, whether or not people believe it or not. But I believed it, and I wanted our people to believe it because I really felt that way. Like it felt unfair at the time, and it felt unjust that we had lost this game that we deserved to win, and the wheels kind of came off. But in the end, it's not about what just happened. It's about what do you make of it? How do you respond?
But you define beliefs and culture.
Well, that's true. That is true, and that is a part of leadership.
And especially Altuve, who's been a thorn in the Rangers' side for years and years. That game was so deflating.
Right.
And I think you speak well to talk about that message, talk about the leadership style and how you just go engage people, even in a hard time.
Yeah.
That's so appropriate.
Well, one of my beliefs is as a player, I always believe that when things are going well, don't get overconfident, and when things are going bad, don't get too low. Try to maintain that middle ground, and I try to do that and project that as a leader as well. And when things are going well, I try to remind our people that, hey, we're not as probably good as our results, and when things are bad, these are the times where you have to be optimistic. I mean, you do have to recognize the things that are causing the poor performance or the underachievement and correct those, but you also have to project a level of optimism and belief because if you don't, nobody else will. And so I think that it's really balancing the highs and the lows. And again, it all comes back to I had a playing career that is not the way you would script it. I mean, it was filled with highs and lows and surgeries and releases and minor league contracts but also World Series championships and All-Stars and Comeback Player of the Year. And what I learned through all of that was that you just can't get high and low. You have to just maintain a steady course. And if you do that, more often than not, you'll prevail. And you focus on what's most important, and oftentimes good things come of it.
Let's remind people that. So you spent 3-4 years in the minor leagues coming out of Princeton, made it to the major leagues. The first game was actually with the Texas Rangers.
That's right. Mm-hmm.
And then several different clubs, but all-star performances, number of times when you got late in games with no hitters, even perfect games, those sorts of things. But then you hit the point with injuries, and you you got to see a lot of small towns around the country with minor league baseball. But then, as you said, you came back from that, comeback player of the year. Walk us through kind of the mindset of being at the top, being an all-star, and then all of a sudden, I'm in the minor leagues trying to work my way back.
Yeah.
Thoughts of quitting at that point? What kept you going?
Tom, it's a great question. And I, early in my career, as with most players who have early success, I thought, okay, I'm going to go on and I'm going to have a great career. And I made an all-star team my third year in. We made the playoffs my second year in. I felt like, all right, we're going to be a playoff team every year. I'm going to win championships. I'm going to be a perennial all-star.
World Series in 15.
Yeah, World Series. But that was kind of after this hard stretch. And so, by 2009, when I first started experiencing shoulder pain, I kind of took for granted, like, all right, my shoulders are a little achy and I'm not pitching very well, but, I'll come back. I'll be fine. And then one surgery leads to a second surgery. It doesn't feel any better, and try to pitch through it for a couple of years. I'm a below average pitcher at that point and really kind of arrowed down and headed really out of the game at that point. Shoulder still hurts, and I'm kind of thinking about what's next. Like, wow, this is not the way my career was supposed to go. And I had a moment where I ran into a former teammate. I was in the minor leagues, rehabbing from my second shoulder surgery, and I ran into a former teammate who had also dealt with a lot of pain in his elbow. And he suggested that I pursue kind of a unknown condition called thoracic outlet syndrome, and that may be the root cause. And it's similar to what, if you have pain down your leg, it may be originating in your back. And it's a nerve condition, and it's similar in your shoulder arm. And maybe perhaps the pain in my shoulder wasn't originating in the shoulder. It was being caused by a nerve being pinched up in my neck. And as I looked into it, sure enough, that's exactly what it was. And I eventually had surgery for it, and then came back the next year and won Comeback Player of the Year. It revitalized my career. It was the first time in 4 years that I was pitching without shoulder pain. But my point with this is that I had this vision early in my career that this was going to be a great career full of personal accolades and team accolades, and it's just this, the way you would draw it up. And as I look back on it, I had the best career because of the adversity that I had to go through and the lessons I learned in those moments where literally I was on the operating table wondering if I would ever play again. And what got me through it was this idea that I had 3 children, and I wanted to prove to my children that hard work and resilience and perseverance matters, and that you can accomplish great things if you're willing to fight and persevere. And that was my biggest motivator. That was it. That was my biggest motivator. I mean, personally, I wanted to be a Major League Baseball player. It was my childhood dream. But at that point, I wanted my kids to see dad accomplish something and fought through the hard times, because they're going to go through it, and I wanted that lesson passed down to them.
So Comeback Player of the Year meant more than all-star appearances and some of those early successes.
The achievements I'm most proud of are obviously championships, because that's team, and that's what I love the most. That's what brings people together. But from an individual standpoint, the Comeback Player of the Year is what I'm most proud of, because there were so many hard times and stressful moments for my family. My wife, she really was like a mom that was watching her husband go around the country kind of by himself, and she was trying to hold down the fort with 3 young kids at home, and everything that they sacrificed and did to support me, and then to have this experience. And not only that, I won Comeback Player of the Year. And after that season, I didn't really have any interest from teams. I went into that offseason of 2014 to 15, and I did not have any major league opportunities. And the whole offseason passed by. And March 7th, I remember the date specifically, the Kansas City Royals called and offered me a major league deal. I was sitting out of camp. I was not willing to report to minor league camp because I felt like I was a major league player. I just proved it. I was the Comeback Player of the Year, had a great season. And the Kansas City Royals called and offered me a very small major league deal. And I, at the time, told my wife, I'm not going to accept it. I'm going to accept a better minor league deal and bet on myself and prove that I'm. And she and my agent outvoted me and said, you're accepting the major league deal and you're going to Kansas City. And as it turns out, it was the best thing that happened because I got to be part of the 2015 World Series Kansas City Royals. And for me, it just had a unique way in these low moments of something leading to something great, mainly because I was willing to persevere and work through it.
So cool. You're a Dallas kid. Talk us through your history here. And obviously, you know what the World Series meant to this city because it was the first one ever. But talk us through growing up in Dallas, Highland Park High School, ultimately going to Princeton. You had other offers. You could have done other things. Knowing the landscape is different a little bit today with NIL and other situations, I'll just leave it at that. Would you have made the same decision, or would you have stuck with going to Princeton?
Yeah, and Princeton versus a Texas or Oklahoma, which
that's right,
very different sports environment.
Completely. Kyle, it's a great question. And it's something actually I'm going through now with my own children because I've got my daughter is 17. She's just wrapped up her junior year, is going to be a senior. And my wife, who I met in college at Princeton, we both went there. We have great pride, but we also have a recognition that one, it's not for everybody. It was a special opportunity for us. We loved it. But I really believe in education is what you make of it. And there's so many great schools, great places. I don't know what I would decide in today's world. And so it's hard to say that, but I do know that growing up here in Dallas, growing up in Highland Park, and the experiences that I had both athletically and academically have shaped who I am. And I'm extremely grateful for this community, DFW specifically, because the people here are, we have great people. And I think the values in this area specifically are great. It's why we've chosen to come back here and raise our family. We moved back to Dallas well before I took the Rangers job. And then I took a job in New York in the commissioner's office. But the point is that we chose North Texas and DFW to raise our family and raise our kids, and in part because of what it provided me. And we wanted our children to have similar values and a way of life that we feel like is a great thing. So I have a great connection to North Texas and DFW and our fans. And when I took the Ranger job, it was December 4th of 2020, I'm sorry, right before 2021. It was right coming out of COVID. And my wife and I decided that to tell our kids we were going to go to Dick's Sporting Goods and buy a bunch of Ranger gear and give it to them and say, Dad's going to be part of the Rangers and we're going to live here. And so we went to Dick's. It's, a few weeks before Christmas, and there was no Ranger gear. There wasn't even a Ranger section. And it broke my heart. I came back to the car. It was raining. My wife was waiting in the car. And I said, we have to change this. I want every kid that grows up in Texas, or in North Texas specifically, in DFW, wearing a Ranger tee with pride. And it's why I wear it every day, because I want our people, I want this community to be proud of the Texas Rangers the same way I was as a kid. And I grew up a diehard Mavericks, Stars, Rangers, and Cowboys fan. And so I really bleed DFW sports. It's and I couldn't be more proud to represent this team and hopefully, make our fans proud.
No, that's neat. Kyle touched on one thing. I want to follow up on the NIL. So college sports now is completely flipped upside down right now. He asked you, would the NIL have changed your decision? Again, you came out with high honors, all-state, both basketball and baseball, going into Princeton. So a lot of different options and kind of at the top of the heap. Would NIL have changed that? And how will NIL change the minor league versus college in baseball that you have to live with all the time with your drafts?
Tom, I'll start with the second question because I think it's a very fascinating point in professional baseball right now. And obviously, we've got our major league draft coming up in a couple months, our amateur draft. And we're looking at the top college players in the country, and we're evaluating them, and the top high school players too. And whereas I would say maybe when I was in high school coming out, I felt like college was a better developmental landscape, both from athletically and emotionally for high school kids, that the professional environment for an 18-year-old is a very tough place. I think NIL is changing that. And I don't know the level to which colleges can fully develop players, because players with the transfer portal and the NIL, there is a lack of continuity. There is a lot of turnover. There's a lot of change. And one of the things that professional baseball does offer in our development system is continuity, consistency of development, one plan over several years to help somebody improve. And now you've got college sports that are, maybe more on par with professional sports, but the major leagues, so to speak, because it is about performance, and it's about performance now. And some of our development in the minor leagues is not necessarily about, the performance in the moment. It's about the big picture, and how are we going to help you, like I said earlier, realize your potential over time. And so I don't know what this means long term. What it is there are a lot of mercenaries. College kids are now mercenaries in some ways. The recruitment for college coaches and the pressures to win that these coaches are under, you have to decide whether or not an 18-year-old or 17-year-old high school kid is better for your program in the moment than maybe recruiting a transfer from another school that's 22, maybe even 23 years old now. So I don't know what it means. I don't know if it's good or bad. It's just very different. And I don't know how, if I were a high school athlete in this age, I don't know how I would make that decision and how it would impact my decision to go to college or sign a professional contract.
That's interesting, Chris, because you answered it in a very different way than I thought you were going to. I thought the NIL would actually have given colleges a little bit of advantage, so as opposed to a kid coming in and saying, okay, I want some money on the front end. Now I can get money. I can go college. And a lot of colleges, LSU, Arizona State, et cetera, those sorts of things, with storied baseball careers, baseball traditions.
That's right. No, you're absolutely right. And I'm not discounting, what those programs are, how great. I'm also speaking through my professional lens, but I am saying that it is different than when I went to college, when you were committed to the college and the college was committed to you. And now that is not the case. It is year to year, and there's financial implications and economic factors that both the colleges and kids are having to decide how that's going to govern their decision making. And you guys both know that when there are economics involved for anybody, performance becomes even more magnified, and that now is at the college level more than ever. And I do think professional baseball offers some things that maybe in the past we haven't from a developmental standpoint.
Patience.
That's right. Patience. Exactly.
Does it change how you look at building a farm system? And talk us through that. Specific
to NIL, we have to make decisions when we approach the draft as to who we can sign. Signability is the number one thing we need to know, because it does no good for us to draft a player that says, I'm going to college and there's nothing you can do to sign me. So we have to understand what the signability is. But I think in terms of the farm system, yes, there are some strategic elements to, do we go heavy college players? Do we go heavy high school? And in the past, I have leaned in our drafts heavy college. And I think we're starting to shift a little bit, because the development in college is not as consistent as maybe it was even 5-10 years ago, because of the changes in the college landscape and players bouncing around a little bit more. And the other thing I'll say from just a global perspective is that it does impact the player or the individual's ability to understand what it's like to be part of a team, and the continuity of being part of a team over a period of time, and the values that you're playing for a team, and you're not necessarily playing for your individual NIL contract or whatever it is, or entering the transfer portal year after year. So there is some element in our player development that we are doing team building to kind of change a little bit the mentality of the player, in terms of we are playing for the team and for the organization, and your individual success, yes, is important to our collective success, but let's focus on the collective, and that will help your individual success.
Let's go back on first. So you're coming out of Highland Park. You've got opportunities, a lot of different schools, both basketball and baseball. Play both of them at Princeton with a lot of success. and were given a guaranteed contract by the Sacramento Kings from a basketball standpoint, minor leagues on the baseball side of it. And I guess we should point out that you're the second tallest player that's ever played professional baseball.
That's right.
Or Major League Baseball, at least. What was the determination to go baseball and kind of put all of your marbles in that bag as opposed to the basketball?
It's a great question. I think if there's one thing in life I could have a second chance, it would be to go back and play out the basketball career and see what that would have led to. It's not a regret, but it's just, you have to make choices in life. And for me, it was really about the timing of the opportunity. And baseball chose me kind of before basketball did. And at the time that I had this opportunity, this offer from the Sacramento Kings, I was 2 years into my baseball career, my minor league baseball career. I had not reached the major leagues. I had gone from what was, maybe a prospect to maybe, a suspect or average prospect. I wasn't at the top of the prospect chart anymore.
Yeah, I like that. I got to remember that one.
And, I had some self-doubt as to whether or not, is this gonna happen? I was in AA. I'd been traded to the Rangers at this point. I was in AA in Frisco, and I was pitching okay, not great. And I'm thinking, am I good enough to be a major league player? I believe I'm going to continue to improve, but I don't know in this moment. And the Sacramento Kings called, and it was a former Princeton coach, legendary Princeton coach, Pete Carril, who was assistant coach for the Sacramento Kings. And he called, and
Jeff Petrie was
also a Princeton. Yeah. Exactly. Jeff Petrie was a former Princeton player, was the general manager of the Sacramento Kings. But Coach Carril was the one who had really kind of convinced Jeff that I was capable of doing this. And at one point, I called Coach Carril and I said, Coach, I'm 2 years out of playing college basketball. I'm really curious why you think I can do this. And he gave me the best answer, which has always stuck with me. He said, you have something you cannot teach. And I said, what is that? And he said, vision. He said, if you have vision, you will make the right pass. You'll guard the right player. You'll fill the right lane. You'll always make the right decisions on the basketball court because you have vision, and you can't teach that. He said, the rest of it we can teach. We can make you a better shooter. We can make you jump higher. We can make you, run a little bit faster. We'll get you in basketball shape. But vision is so critical to being a good basketball player. And I thought it was the most brilliant answer because I was expecting him to say something like, oh, you're a great shooter and a good defender and a shot blocker. And he said, you have vision. And it just really stuck with me that he saw the game in a different way. He was such a brilliant mind. I never got to play for him in college, but I got to know him a little bit post-college in this process. And anyway, I was in AA, and I spent the entire summer training to go to camp with the Sacramento Kings at the end of the summer. I said, I have to finish out the baseball season, but at the end of the summer, I will come to camp. And I think there was something with that freed me up mentally. And maybe it was the training I was doing. I was training in the mornings for basketball. Then in the afternoons, I was going to the baseball stadium and doing my baseball training on top of that. And I went from AA to AAA. I made 5 starts in AAA. I pitched great, was lights out, and the Rangers called me up to the big leagues, and I made 7 starts at the end of the year. And I felt like I've just realized my dream of being a Major League Baseball player for my hometown team. How do I walk away from that and go pursue a basketball career? And so at that point, I decided to stick with baseball.
And then they traded you.
Yeah.
A year later, they traded me.
I did.
Which was part of the business. I was heartbroken when that happened.
It was a big trade.
I felt like I was going to be...
what year was this?
This was 2000, after the 2005 season, before 2006. I believe I had won a Rangers record for a rookie pitcher, 12 wins that year. And and I thought I'm going to be a Texas Ranger my entire career. Exactly. I helped this team win World Series as a player. And I got traded that winter to the San Diego Padres. And as it turned out, it was the very best thing that could have happened to me at that point in my career for a number of reasons. It was, it was my 3rd time being traded. I got traded twice in the minor leagues, but I was never heartbroken the way this one did. And then all of a sudden we got to go. I was a newlywed. My wife and I moved to San Diego, and I got to be part of a winning team in San Diego. We made the playoffs that year. I got to play for Bruce Bochy, who is our manager now. I became an all-star, and we really started our family kind of on our own out in San Diego, which obviously is a beautiful place. And we spent 9 years living in San Diego before moving back to Dallas, mainly when our kids got to be school age. We decided we wanted them to grow up in Texas.
So I want to dig in a little bit on the personal side of your life.
Yeah.
You've got 3 kids. You've talked about them frequently so far. What grounds you? What grounds you and your wife? What are the things that make you Chris Young, the just individual, not the Texas Rangers GM, but what makes you want to be a husband and a father and all the things that you
Well,
discussed?
Kyle, that's what matters in life. Anything that, the professional accomplishments are tremendous. And for me, I'm kind of a humble person by nature. My dad was this way. It was one of his greatest qualities, and I'm so thankful he passed it on to me. He just really wasn't super impressed by anything, and he treated everybody with respect and dignity, which I think is very important. And so I don't take myself too seriously. I don't think that I am any smarter or have any better leadership or personal qualities than anybody else. I think that just sometimes I'm more willing to maybe speak up or say the hard things when they need to be said, but I don't have life figured out any more than the next person. I do know that the most important thing for me in my life is my family, my wife and my children, and as long as I have them and we keep a good perspective that at the end of the day, our health, our happiness is most important. There's going to be successes, there are going to be failures, but at the end of the day, they are what matters.
Okay, I'm going to shift gears again then.
Yeah.
Okay, so we're in the middle of the baseball season. You've got the Yankees, you've got the Dodgers that seem to have endless money. I don't know where all the money comes from, but I'm sure it comes from somewhere. Talk us through, as you lead an organization, how do you think about an emerging market, not just emerging, but a very steadily growing market in Dallas? How do you think about competing against those 2 franchises and frankly, those 2 cities operationally in terms of talent, market share? Talk me through that.
Well, competing with them economically is probably a lost cause, right? Their market size, their revenues are so significant that to compete with them on the economic level that they operate is really a challenge. I think it's a kind of a fool's game. And so I'm not going to get caught up in that. But really, when you look at just the championships and maybe even the number of World Series that each franchise has been in over the last 15 years, I mean, we're right there. And I do believe that we have, with the Texas Rangers, one of the best opportunities in baseball. And this is a conversation that I've had with our owner, Ray Davis. He sees it the same way, which I love, is that North Texas is a thriving, growing community. And it's hard for us to classify or characterize ourselves as a small market anymore. I mean, we are the 4th biggest market in baseball.
5 years, the 3rd largest.
That's right, exactly. And it only continues to grow. So I think there is just an abundance of opportunity for our organization. And we may not ever get to the economic level of the Yankees or the Dodgers, but we don't need to be successful. We've already proven that in 2023. And our ownership has given us enough resources financially to field a competitive team. And now it's about how do you bring out the best in the group we have. We have enough talent to win. There is no excuse in terms of the talent we have. And I'm very thankful for that. There's not a day that goes by that I am not thankful that I get to be the president of baseball operations for a team that has the resources that we can spend at the level we are. We're not at the top of baseball. We don't need to be. And that's the beauty of baseball. It doesn't guarantee success.
But then let's talk about baseball broader. Almost tempted to ask you, okay, if you were the general manager of the Marlins or general manager of the Pittsburgh Steelers. So in that case, the Dodgers are roughly $435 million payroll.
Yeah.
The Marlins are somewhere about $80 million. So kind of a 4-to-1 type
big disparity.
Game. How do you look at baseball? So baseball's got that disparity, which you don't have in other sports because of the way they've structured revenue sharing, et cetera. A lot of young people, future, have seemed to kind of walk away from baseball. African-American, which was an important component of the baseball player pool.
Right.
That's reduced substantially. Then we'll get into a lot of other things, but television changing, money, that sort of thing.
Yeah.
How do you look at baseball and the health of baseball today in 2025?
Tom, it's a great question. And it really kind of takes me back about 5 years to my time in the commissioner's office. And it was one of the best experiences for me because I got to come right off the playing field and go to the commissioner's office where I got to see the game through a completely different lens. I mean, I
And one of those pieces is the strategy side,
That's right. That's exactly right. And everything you're speaking to me, at its core, is part of the baseball strategy, the on-field product. Because at the end of the day, that's what matters most, is that we have, one, a league that has competitive integrity, that every team has a chance to win and the ability to win. It doesn't mean that economically everybody's on the same playing field, but it means that there is competitive integrity, that every organization in some way can field a team that can compete and win, because that's what the sport is about. And every fan base should feel like their team, maybe not every year, but over a period of time, has a chance to win a championship. And for some organizations, it may be built differently through internal development, drafting and development. For other organizations, it may be free agent spending. But the competitive integrity of the sport is critically important for all 30 markets to have the opportunity to win. Secondly, the on-field product and the rules. I think what you're hitting on is so critically important for the future of the game. And I commend the commissioner's office for doing a great job with their rule change initiatives a couple years ago.
Pitch clock, that's it.
Exactly. Mainly the pitch clock.
Yeah.
And the pitch clock, I think, has done the best thing since really maybe lowering the mound in 1972 in terms of impacting the change in the game, or maybe the designated hitter, one or the other. But either way, the game is shorter. The game time is shorter. Fans don't want to see a 3.5, 4 hour game. I mean, the attention span is proven to be like 2.5 hours is the target game time. And the commissioner's office has done a tremendous job of getting the game. These aren't new rules in terms of impacting the game, like it's saying we're going to change the game to a way it's never been played. What it is just getting the game back in balance to where it used to be. Games used to be 2 hours and 15 minutes, 2 hours, 2.5 hours, and that's where it needs to be. Now, what it hasn't perfectly addressed is the action in the game. And I think that's the next step for the league. I think the next step is creating more action in the game. Today's generation of children.
So what should they be doing? You're commissioner of baseball now. What do you want to do?
First of all, I'm glad I'm not. That job is so hard. But and this is the initiative of the commissioner's office. They are working hard. They are studying this constantly. But how do you get more balls in play? I say we have the best athletes who have ever played the game of baseball. Even from 5 years ago, 7 years ago when I was playing, this generation of athlete is better. We have made so many advances in terms of strength and conditioning and biomechanical analysis and ways to maximize our players. But in turn, perhaps the game has gotten a little stale because there's less action, because the game's harder than ever. And so I think studying ways to create more action in the game and more balls in play, less strikeouts, less walks, and just putting these athletes on display more. And I think if we do that, you're going to see the best product that has ever been seen in Major League Baseball. I fundamentally believe this because the athletes are better than ever, but how do we get them on display? And that's what I talk about when swinging the game back in balance. It's gone too far in terms of the lack of action in the game. And there are some initiatives. I have one that I believe would work. I think that, at some point, the mound distance has to be adjusted. I just think that the mound distance was created in 1893, I believe, and it's remained the same at 60 feet, 6 inches. I mean, we're talking like, multiple generations of players that have come. The game is bigger, faster, stronger than ever. It may not be perfectly meant for that distance. And I think we have to, at some point, study that. But there are other ways to address some of these issues to create more action in the game. But I think as we improve the on-field product, we're going to get more interest. We're going to get different demographics of players, and whether it's international and Latin American players, it's Asia, it's domestically with our Mexican Americans, it's our African Americans. I mean, baseball is a great sport, and it's one of the most beautiful things is that it ties together so many different demographics and groups of people. And I think as the game gets better on the field, more and more people will gravitate back to the sport.
Could you ever see the MLB expanding South America, Latin America, the Caribbean, into Europe? I mean, I know obviously in Asia it's a huge deal, clearly. But does the game, because take a look at the NFL. The NFL's trying all sorts of things in all sorts of cities, games every year, et cetera. Does the MLB
More
have
games coming up this year
exactly.
out of the States than any year?
Ever.
That's right.
Does the MLB have any sort of thought around that? Is that an expansion?
I think the league has done a great job of playing exhibition, or actually in regular season games in both Europe,
Australia.
Australia. That's right. Asia and Latin America. And they're trying to broaden their fan base and grow the game. And I don't think it's out of the realm of possibilities one day that whether it's expansion to those areas or a league, maybe an Asian league, who knows? I just think that the game is healthy in a lot of ways, and internationally it's very popular. And so how do we continue to tap into that? How do we continue to develop the game in those countries and create a fan base globally that is going to watch our product?
Well, the competition's different too. I mean, it's difficult to tell, but there's an age difference between the two of us. When I was a kid, it was baseball. The summer, and it was Phoenix. You'd go out 110 degrees and you'd play baseball all day, and that was it. Now I look at my kids, and it's not just baseball, but so many other different options. So the competitive landscape's very different too.
It is. And if you look at the numbers, there are more kids playing youth baseball right now than ever. But the question is, how do you retain them? And how do you continue to make baseball the sport that they want to come back to? And that's one of the challenges that Major League Baseball faces. And it's a critically important piece to growing our fan base over time.
I'm curious, again, your time in professional baseball spans a quarter of a century now. Look back on when you were in the minors coming up, and then as you bring a player up in 2025, how are the players different?
Tom, it's a great question. And I've always said I'm not going to be the guy that says, oh, back when I played, it was this way and it was better. And I disagree. I think the game has only evolved, and I think it's harder than ever. I actually think that there are more pressures now than when I played. That when players today, when they fail, they are on display to a much broader audience than I did. If I had failure, it was baseball fans had to read it in the sports page. The internet was there, but it wasn't like ubiquitous the way it is today in society. And, today it's social media and the pressures of social media. I mean, I literally had a player a couple of years ago tell me that when he doesn't play well, he goes and reads the comments on Twitter. And I said, why do you do that to yourself? And he said, I can't help it. I feel like I'm letting people down, and I want to see if people are mad at me. And I said, well, one, yes, they're going to be mad at you. And two, I said, if there was a bottle of liquid, if this liquid right here, if this water was labeled poison, you wouldn't go over and drink it. So that's no different. Don't subject yourself to that. But it didn't, I don't think it landed. And I see it with my own kids. And so I think of it through this lens of my own children. One, just going back to the previous question of, how does today's generation consume our product? But two, with our players specifically, like, what is the impact of social media? And, for a lot of them, they have their own individual brands. And so they've put themselves out there, and there is more exposure, and there's more fanfare and people following them, and there's more pressures associated with that. I did not have to deal with that as a player. And I think it is the single biggest thing that has impacted today's generation of players.
When we talked earlier this year, you had just visited with 200 of your leading prospects out of the minor leagues. Mm-hmm. A lot of leadership lessons there that you convey. Give us a sense of that talk in which you tried to convey to 200 minor leaguers, had the same aspirations you did a quarter of a century ago to get to the major leagues.
Yeah. Tom, it was one of my favorite moments of the year, and I try to do this every year, but I really, there's only a certain period of time where we have our entire organization in one spot, and that's in spring training, and we had everybody under one roof, and that's my moment to really spend time with them. And what I wanted them to hear from me is that, one, I've been in your shoes. I know what you're going through. I not exactly, there's differences, but I understand a lot of the things you're going through, and I want you to know, from my standpoint, some of the lessons I learned along the way and how that may be applicable. And, the biggest thing I say to players, there are two main things. The first of which is, do not let your success or failure in this sport become your identity. Because if it is, it's fleeting. That is not who you are. Who you are is your character. It is not your identity. What you do on the field, that's your profession, but it is not who you are as a person. So separate the two. It took me 3 or 4 years into my career to learn that. And for the same reasons that player that goes back and looks at Twitter when he doesn't pitch well, I felt the same. I was, I'd get down when I didn't pitch well and, be on top of the world to some degree when, maybe within reason, but anyway, don't let that become your identity. And then the second piece is there were 2 mantras that govern my career that I share and I talk about daily. Everybody in our executive team in the front office will hear this. They know it. 1, it's a performance-based game. And 2, the game owes you nothing. And what I mean by that, and when I tell our players this, is that they are in control of their careers, that we as a front office or a coach, we do not determine their success. They are the ones who are going to determine their success. And for me, when this happened, a sort of a light bulb went off in my mind, and it was an empowerment mindset that I realized, wait, the scouting director, the farm director, or whomever is not in control. I will determine my future by how well I do, how well I perform. This is up to me. And at that point, when I realized I had some level of control, it just freed me up mentally. And for our players, I want them to know that. I don't want to stand there as the president of baseball operations, speaking to them, telling them, you're going here and you're going here and you have to do this. It's not up to me. They will determine their success. We're here to assist them and help them and support them.
Those 200 are different, but you saw your kids out there. A lot of criticism that this is the participation trophy generation.
Yeah.
Thoughts?
Oh, I have different feelings on this because, from a professional landscape, not everybody is going to play professional sports. Very few of them are. So what's the end game here? What's the end game? The beauty of youth sports to me is that you get to learn life's lessons in a safe environment. You get to learn how to fail in an environment that is going to prepare you for failure in an unsafe environment in life when you have to deal with the real consequences, right? And so it's how do you deal with those experiences? And this is the thing for me with youth sports and specifically youth coaches is that the primary goal in my mind at a certain age, it should become more about performance. But up to a certain age, this should be about, like I said earlier, retainment. It should be about having an experience that is going to instill a joy and a passion and a love for the sport, which is going to keep you coming back. One of our core beliefs, one of our core principles with the Texas Rangers, we have 3 of them. The first is be a good teammate. The second is compete with passion. And the third is dominate the fundamentals. But I'm going to talk on the compete with passion because the game is a game of failure. And life is about failure. And the way you overcome failure oftentimes is you have a love and a passion and a desire to succeed that brings you back through those moments of failure. And I think that's what sports can do, especially youth sports. So if we instill fear in children when they fail or we yell at them on a playing field for a mistake they made, that it's just senseless to me. So the participation trophy, if it's part of keeping the kids' love of the sport and it allows them to come back and play it again the next year, I'm perfectly fine with it because I can't remember what leagues I won trophies in and what I won second place versus third place versus, first place when I was 8 years old. But I know I love the sport. And that's what I want for every kid that plays the game of baseball or really for any youth sport is that they have a positive experience that they want to come back and continue to do it and learn life's lessons.
And this is a generational difference, though, because as you say that, I wonder, are we really doing what we should in leadership, which is define reality?
Sure.
When we're not willing to tell children, you failed.
Sure.
And that's part of life.
Sure.
So that all of a sudden their first failure is at a time way down the line when it becomes more difficult to handle, as opposed to where you just said it, you learn failure on the front end, and that's part of life.
Right. No, it is part of life. And through sports, what in youth sports specifically, like what is failure? Is failure getting beat, or is failure not giving your best effort? I say you fail when you stop trying. So it's like, I think defining what failure is the critical piece of this. And if a team gives their best effort and they finish in second place, should you deprive them of a trophy? But they got out talented. The other team was a little bit better, but they did everything they could within their control. They gave their best effort. Is that failure? To me, it's not. But I respect, I just run into a lot of youth coaches, and what's funny is when I see them at our kids' events, they're all on best behavior when I'm there. They know that I'm there and they're on best behavior, and they come up, Mr. Young, it's good to see you. And then I go to the other field and they're screaming at their kid, and I'm like, look at this, look at this guy. Yeah, exactly.
Chris, it's funny because it's personal for me. Back when I was 11 years old, I was on a national travel baseball team, and I was playing third base and doing all things, and I loved baseball. Mm-hmm. But I had a coach who used to take us out in the outfield after we lost a game.
Yeah.
And yell at us for 15 minutes. No parents allowed. Everybody's watching from the stands and all that stuff. And we just got ripped a new one. And at the same time, I was also traveling nationally for tennis. Mm-hmm. And so I had this decision to make. At age 12, my parents came to me and said, hey, we're not doing both here. This is interesting, but you got to make a choice. And ultimately, those experiences, because I grown up in a household of encouragement, those experiences, unfortunately with baseball, made me choose tennis. Right. And, the Lord had all sorts of plans, and it worked out all great.
And you became an elite tennis player.
I did. But it was just, it's very real, because I think to your point about, are we yelling at failure or loss, or what's the why?
You're yelling at outcome.
Exactly.
But I think defining your point is exactly, it resonates with me immensely, Kyle, because I see it all the time. And I really think that we need to, recalibrate what youth sports is about. And it's about the life lessons, and it's teaching. I always say attitude and effort and energy are what we need to be coaching. And results are a byproduct of those things. And for kids, it's like, if you teach them the love of something, when things get tough, if they love it, they're going to find a way to persevere.
You've thrown two nuggets out there that I think are worth reinforcing. Mm-hmm. One is this outcome versus effort.
That's right.
And kind of how we think about failure. The other one was the earlier one on the identity. Uh-huh. And I will tell you that it's not only sports, in business and in the public sector. Yeah. People that think their identity is what they're doing. Yeah. It is a recipe for failure.
I've seen it with too many teammates, unfortunately. Too many teammates that just didn't know how to handle failure in their careers when things went south. Probably didn't handle success well either. And I'm just very fortunate that I had two good parents. My dad was especially, both parents, hardworking parents from blue-collar families that were self-made and provided opportunity for me. They instilled in me the values of education, but they also still instilled humility and understanding perspective. And for some kids, it's hard. They don't have that. They think what they do is everything in life. And if they don't succeed in that, then they're a failure. And it's a tough existence with that mentality.
Did you have a single mentor or a series of mentors throughout your career?
I've had several throughout my career. I've been so fortunate to have over the course of my, I feel like one, my parents started there, and then growing up, having so many teachers and other parents in the community that helped raise me, and being part, the coaches, good and bad, but high school coaches. I was very fortunate to have two really good high school coaches in basketball and baseball that helped me. And then college, my college baseball coach especially was just so wonderful and really taught me, similar to what you were saying, a conviction that, hey, you can be a Major League Baseball player. You're good enough, and we're going to give you that opportunity. And then within the professional circles, former teammates, Greg Maddux, Trevor Hoffman in San Diego, former pitcher of the Rangers, Kenny Rogers was a great teammate that I loved. There's just been so many teammates that were mentors. But then in the professional world, post-playing career, I've had several, one being Dayton Moore, the former president of baseball operations for the Kansas City Royals, who signed me in 2015. Dayton is now one of my senior advisors, and I spoke to him this morning. I was venting to him, and he's kind of laughing at me because he remembers these days when he would vent. And but Dayton has been a huge mentor for me. At Major League Baseball, I had the opportunity to work with Joe Torre, and Joe, I got to work side by side with Joe for 2.5 years. One of my favorite people I've ever been around. And Joe, I'll never forget. I asked him, Joe, when you came to the New York Yankees, what was your mentality? What was your thought? How did you instill belief in these guys? And he said, when he came there, he said he talked about winning multiple championships, not just one. He felt like one wasn't going to be enough. He wanted to create this mentality that we're going beyond that. And it really resonated with me. And I kind of wanted to bring the same thing to the Rangers, that, hey, this isn't just one and done. We want to win multiple championships over a period of time. We want to sustain success. And sometimes that's one of the things I struggle with right now, that we're not the best team in baseball, but I think that, we still can be, and we'll work back towards that. But the mentality that, one wasn't good enough, and that's sometimes, it's a challenge, but it's also, it is about the next one.
Winning is clearly important, but the owner cares about valuation, that sort of thing.
Sure.
You're in a community where I think it's positive. Texas Rangers have an enormous following, well thought of as a franchise and an organization. But you've also got three others.
Yeah.
The Stars, the Mavericks, and the Cowboys that are arguably on the top of their leagues too. Given that, and given some of the challenges we've talked about baseball, and throw some of the television issues to come in, ESPN just pulled back from a contract with Major League Baseball. You've had a lot of challenges with some of the regional players. When you think about revenues, when you think about positioning it, where do you take the Texas Rangers for the next 5 years, 10 years?
It's a great question. And Tom, for me, it starts with winning, because winning is what it's about. Winning solves all. And if this team can compete for division championships, playoff berths, and World Series championships, you build a fan base and you build momentum, and those revenue streams naturally happen, right? That people want to be affiliated with greatness. They want to be affiliated with success. And, I say I was talking to our the head on the business side yesterday, and if there's discretionary income in the marketplace, we want to capture it. And fans have choices. And what will define that choice oftentimes is success. They want to be part of success. So it's critically important for us to win. And I recognize that. And for me, I want it so badly, because I feel like this is a great opportunity for our organization to, one, build on the momentum of 2023. But as I look at, as I said earlier, our marketplace, North Texas continues to grow. And we have this great opportunity to, as a franchise, capture some of that growth with our fandom. And so I think it starts there. These teams are no longer just entertainment products. They are real estate developments. They are media, and they're technology companies too, because we've got an R&D staff that is growing immensely. And so it's becoming, they're more than just an on-field product, but the on-field product is the centerpiece. It's the most important part. And if we win, all those other revenue streams will naturally take care of themselves.
Okay, before we close, I want to do a little lightning round.
Go.
Favorite away ballpark?
San Francisco. Yeah, I love it.
Why?
Mainly because I pitched well there.
Okay. It's not the ballpark, it's the memory.
Yeah, exactly. But it is so beautiful. It's just on the bay there. It is, it's a classic ballpark. I love going. It's a wonderful city. I love it. It's a great ballpark. I have several, but San Francisco stands out.
Favorite ballpark food?
The cheesesteaks in the visiting clubhouse in Philadelphia. And one of the things as a player is actually you don't get to really explore the concourse and eat the food up there. So oftentimes you're evaluating the food in a stadium by the visiting clubhouse. But the cheesesteaks in Philadelphia, it's the best cheesesteak you will find. And in fact, they keep a tally of which team eats the most cheesesteaks when they come through Philadelphia. Yeah, and specifically which player too. So, but the cheesesteak in the visiting clubhouse in Philadelphia.
Team that gives the Rangers the hardest time to deal with?
Well, the Astros. I mean, and in some ways, it's hard to say as a Ranger fan, but they've been a model of success over the last 7-8 years. What they have done is what we aspire to do, and I want us to be the team that people look at as the example. And the Astros have been that. They've won the division. However many straight years, they continue to win. They're winning this year. And so they've certainly been a team that we want to catch and pass. And we've got our work cut out for us.
Okay, last one. Outside of Game 5 of the World Series in 23, because you can't answer that. Favorite baseball game moment?
Game 1 of the 2015 World Series, I came in relief and pitched the 12th, 13th, and 14th innings, and we won it in the bottom of the 14th inning, and I was the pitcher of record and received the win.
2 down. First guy he faced was Murphy, and now he gets him again on a pop-up. Struck him out the first time, pops him up here in the 14th. Let's go. Bottom of the 14th here in Game 1.
But just in that moment, I'd worked my whole life for that moment, and you never know how you're going to respond. You never know, how you're going to do. And I wasn't supposed to pitch that night. I was slated to start Game 4. I was kind of emergency in the bullpen if something happened. And as it turned out, it happened, and the game went extra innings. And it was a late night too. I think I didn't get in the game until probably 11 p.m. And I had a cup of coffee at 10 p.m. because I knew the way the game was headed that I needed something to kind of wake me up. But as I was warming up, we made 2 quick outs, and I was not warm. It was a chilly night, a little drizzle, and I was thinking, I've worked my whole life to get to the World Series, and I'm about to go in the game with the game on the line, no margin of error, and I'm not even loose yet. And I was starting to go, uh-oh, this isn't good. And our batter, Salvador Perez, got up to bat, and he was normally a pretty quick hitter and make early contact the first or second pitch. He drew a walk, and it bought me about 7 or 8 extra warm-up pitches before I went in the game. And then when I got in the game, there was just such a laser focus that it took care of itself. The only other one I would say, Kyle, I'm gonna back up here. That same year, right before the playoffs started, I lost my dad. My dad passed away of multiple myeloma, the blood cancer, and he died on a Saturday night at about 11:30 at night. I was scheduled to pitch the next afternoon, Sunday afternoon, and the team was in a pennant race. It was a must-win game, and we didn't have another starting pitcher. And Dayton Moore, who was our general manager or president at the time, called me and said, "See why you need to go home." And I said, "Dayton, my dad wants me to pitch. I know he'd want me to pitch." And so 12 hours after my dad passed away, I took the ball and I pitched in a must-win game, and it was the most peaceful experience of my life. I felt like I was out on the mound by myself, just with my dad out there, and through 5 no-hit innings. After that, I was emotionally exhausted. I came off the mound, was in tears. The manager hugged me. Dayton met me, and I caught a flight before the game even ended back home, and came home and had to grieve with my family, and then 4 days later go back and make the next start, and then the playoffs started. And so that time period was the highest of highs and the lowest of lows, because we win the World Series 30 days later, but my dad, who had been such an important part of my life, wasn't there to experience it. So, but that day pitching was something I'll never forget.
We see the emotion in your eyes right now.
Yeah. I mean, I can't talk about it without, my eyes watering a little bit. It's, it was a special memory for me.
Chris, we've appreciated you being with us. Clearly an illustrious career. And again, not only on the baseball field, but taking that experience and translating it to management and the success that you've had, 2023 World Series winner, both on the field and in the front office. But I think more important than that is you've shown what kind of a person you are.
No, Tom, I appreciate it. I really, the success is a collective effort by so many great people, and I think we have great things ahead to come. But in the end, what I love most about my job is that I get the opportunity to try to help others realize their dreams and bring out the best. And for me, it's the most fulfilling, rewarding experience. And I think that's ultimately what life's about, is finding that purpose and helping others. And I'm loving every minute of it.
I think you're doing it. And let's get hot. And
I love it. We need it.
Let's go make the playoffs.
and see you in October.
I look forward to it. Thank you guys for having me.
Of course, thank you.
Yeah.
Appreciate it.
Yeah.